Just a heads up, you guys, I'm going to be giving away some spoilers, so if you haven't gone this far into the book and if you don't want to be spoiled, then stop watching this video. If so, enjoy! Before she reached the last door on the left, Lucy was beginning to wonder whether the corridor had grown longer since she began her journey and whether this was part of the magic of the house. But she got to it at last, and the door was open. It was a large room with three big windows, and it was lined from floor to ceiling with books, more books than Lucy had ever seen before, tiny little books, fat and dumpy books, and books bigger than any church Bible you have ever seen, all bound in leather and smelling old and learned and magical. But she knew from her instructions that she need not bother about any of these, for the book, the magic book, was lying on a reading desk in the very middle of the room. She saw that she would have to read it standing. Anyway, there were no chairs, and also that she would have to stand with her back to the door while she read it. So at once she turned to shut the door. It wouldn't shut. Some people may disagree with Lucy about this, but I think she was quite right. She said she wouldn't have minded if she could have shut the door, but that it was unpleasant to have to stand in a place like that with an open doorway right behind your back. I should have felt just the same, but there was nothing else to be done. One thing that worried her a good deal was the size of the book. The chief voice had not been able to give her any idea of whereabouts in the book the spell for making things visible came. He even seemed rather surprised at her asking. He expected her to begin at the beginning and go on till she came to it. Obviously, he had never thought that there was any way of finding a place in a book. "But it might take me days and weeks," said Lucy, looking at the huge volume, "and I feel already as if I've been in this place for hours." She went up to the desk and laid her hand on the book. Her fingers tingled when she touched it, as if it were full of electricity. She tried to open it, but couldn't at first. This, however, was only because it was fastened by two leaden clasps, and when she had undone these, it opened easily enough. And what a book it was! It was written, not printed, written in a clear, even hand, with thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes, very large, easier than print, and so beautiful that Lucy stared at it for a whole minute and forgot about reading it. The paper was crisp and smooth, and a nice smell came from it, and in the margins, around the big colored capital letters at the beginning of each spell, there were pictures. There was no title page or title. The spells began straight away, and at first there was nothing very important in them. There were cures for warts by washing your hands in the moonlight in a silver basin, and toothache and cramped, and a spell for making a swarm of bees. The picture of the man with toothache was so lifelike that it would have set your own teeth aching if you looked at it for too long, and the golden bees which were dotted all round the fourth spell looked for a moment as if they were really flying. Lucy could hardly tear herself away from that first page, but when she turned over, the next was just as interesting. "But I must get on," she told herself, and on she went for about 30 pages, which, if she had remembered them, would have taught her how to find buried treasure, how to remember things forgotten, how to forget things you don't want to remember, how to tell whether anyone was speaking the truth, how to call up or prevent wind, fog, snow, sleet, or rain, how to produce enchanted sleep, and how to give a man an ass's head, as they did to poor Bottom. And the longer she read, the more wonderful and more real the pictures became. Then she came to a page which was such a blaze of pictures that one hardly noticed the writing. Hardly, but she did notice the first words. They were, "An infallible spell to make beautiful her that othereth beyond the lot of mortals." Lucy peered at the pictures with her face close to the page, and though they had seemed crowded and multisome before, she found that she could now see them quite clearly. The first was a picture of a girl standing at a reading desk reading in a huge book, and the girl was dressed exactly like Lucy. In the next picture, Lucy, for the girl in the picture was Lucy herself, was standing up with her mouth open and a rather terrible expression on her face, chanting or reciting something. In the third picture, the beauty beyond the lot of mortals had come to her. It was strange, considering how small the pictures had looked at first, that the Lucy in the picture now seemed quite as big as the real Lucy, and they looked into each other's eyes, and the real Lucy looked away after a few minutes because she was dazzled by the beauty of the other Lucy, though she could see a sort of likeness to herself in that beautiful face. And now the pictures came crowding on her thick and fast. She saw herself throned on high at a great tournament in Coloman, and all the kings of the world fought because of her beauty. And after that it turned from tournaments to real wars, and all Narnia and Arganland, Talma and Colom and Galma and Terabithia were laid waste with the fury of the kings and dukes and great lords who fought for her favour. Then it changed, and Lucy, still beautiful beyond the lot of mortals, was back in England, and Susan, who had always been the beauty of the family, came home from America. The Susan in the picture looked exactly like the real Susan, only plainer with a nasty expression, and Susan was jealous of the dazzling beauty of Lucy, but that didn't matter a bit because no one cared anything about Susan now. "I will say the spell," said Lucy. "I don't care. I will." She said "I don't care" because she had a strong feeling that she mustn't. But when she looked back at the opening words of the spell, there, in the middle of the writing, where she had felt quite sure that there had never been no picture before, she found the great face of the lion, Aslan himself, staring into hers. It was painted such a bright gold that it seemed to be coming toward her after the page, and indeed she was never quite sure afterward that it hadn't really moved a little. At any rate, she knew the expression on his face quite well. He was growling, and you could see most of his teeth. She became horribly afraid and turned over the next page at once. A little later, she came to a spell which would let you know what your friends thought about you. Now Lucy had wanted very badly to try the other spell, the one that made you beautiful beyond the lot of mortals, so she felt that to make up for not having said it, she really would say this one. And all in a hurry, for fear her mind would change, she said the words. Nothing will induce me to tell you what they were. Then she waited for something to happen. As nothing happened, she began looking at the pictures, and all at once she saw the very last thing she expected, a picture of a third-class carriage in a train with two schoolgirls sitting in it. She knew them at once. They were Marjorie Preston and Anne Featherstone, only now it was much more than a picture. It was alive. She could see the telegraph post flicking past outside the window. Then gradually, like when the radio is coming on, she could hear what they were saying. "Shall I see anything of you this term?" said Anne. "Or are you still going to be all taken up with Lucy Pevensey?" "Don't know what you mean by taking up," said Marjorie. "Oh, yes, you do," said Anne. "You were crazy about her last term." "No, I wasn't," said Marjorie. "I've got more sense than that. Not a bad little kid in her way, but I was getting pretty tired of her before the end of term." "Well, you jolly well won't have the chance any other term," shouted Lucy. "Two-faced little beast!" But the sound of her own voice at once reminded her that she was talking to a picture and that the real Marjorie was far away in another world. "Well," Lucy said to herself, "I did think better of her than that, and I did all sorts of things for her last term, and I stuck to her when not many other girls would, and she knows it too, and to Anne Featherstone of all people. I wonder, are all my friends the same? There are lots of other pictures. No, I won't look at any more. I won't. And with a great effort she turned over the page, but not before a large angry tear had splashed on it. On the next page she came to a spell for the refreshment of the spirit. The pictures were fewer here, but very beautiful, and what Lucy found herself reading was more like a story than a spell. It went on for 3 pages, and before she had read to the bottom of the page, she had forgotten that she was reading at all. She was living in the story as if it were real, and all the pictures were real too. When she got to the third page and come to the end, she said, "That is the loveliest story I've ever read, or ever shall read it in my whole life. Oh, I wish I had got on reading it for 10 years. At least I'll read it over again." But here part of the magic book came into play. You couldn't turn back. The right-hand pages, the ones ahead, can be turned. The left-hand pages could not. "Oh, what a shame," said Lucy. "I did so want to read it again. Well, at least I must remember it. Let's see. It was about... Oh dear, it's all fading away again. And even this last page is going blank. This is a very strange book. How could I have forgotten? It was about a cup, and a sword, and a tree, and a green hill. I know that much, but I can't remember, and what shall I do?" And she never could remember. And ever since that day, what Lucy means by a good story is a story which reminds her of the forgotten story in the magician's book. She turned on and found to her surprise a page with no pictures at all, but the first words were, "A spell to make hidden things visible." She read it through and made sure all the hard words and then said it out loud. And she knew at once that it was working, because as she spoke the colors came into the capital letters at the top of the page and the pictures began appearing in the margins. It was like when you hold to the fire something written in invisible ink and the writing gradually shows up, only instead of dinging color of lemon juice, which is the easiest invisible ink, this was all gold and blue and scarlet. They were odd pictures and contained many figures that Lucy did not much like the look of. And then she thought, "I suppose I made everything invisible, and not only the thumpers downstairs. There might be lots of other invisible things hanging about a place like this. I'm not sure that I want to see them all."